Welcome back to Building and Breaking, where we talk about how brands are built, trust is broken, and what salon owners, hairstylists, and pro beauty brands can learn. I'm your host, Nina Kovner. And I've been thinking a lot about mentors lately. And in this week's episode, we are talking about a brand that I have studied for decades. They were one of the first on my list when I started thinking about rebranding this podcast. And the founder of this brand was really one of my most important mentors early on in my career, and one that I have never met, was never able to meet. This week, we're talking about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines wasn't built like in a boardroom with a bunch of analysts. It was built by Herb Kelleher, a wild, brilliant founder and leader who loved people and really, I believed that business could be human. It could be fun, it could be joyful. And he didn't just create at the time what was an incredibly revolutionary airline. He created a culture that was so evident and still to this day is evident in any time if you've ever experienced Southwest Airlines. This culture showed. It was shown in their pricing, in the choice of planes they used, and of course in the brilliant people, in the people in the front line, whether it was the gate agents or the flight attendants. They had one type of aircraft, they had one class of service. They were simple, they were consistent, and even their logo was a heart. And it wasn't just about brand identity. I truly believe that was a strategic choice because brand identity is meant to help tell the story of the brand. It was an indication of care, right? And you know, one of Southwest's key brand promises and also became an ad campaign, tagline, etc., slogan, you are now free to move about the country. Again, very strategic because everything starts with brand story. And at the time, Southwest first began to fly, I believe, in the early 70s. I think it was 1971. Air travel was not accessible. It was definitely something for people that had money. Um, and so, you are now free to move about the country meant that for so many people that air travel was not accessible to, available to, they now were creating a solution to allow people to move about the country and to create experiences and connect with their loved ones. It was a huge point of difference. And so as we go through this episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about differentiation. Again, the themes are the same in all these episodes, but Southwest is kind of a heartbreaking story because they were so solid and so consistent for so long, like record breaking consecutive profitable quarters type of stuff, like in the history books type of stuff. And then things started to go south, no pun intended. So to me, they were absolutely the brand with a heart. And, not all corporations have hearts. I mean, they may have, the people have hearts, but, the corporations can be shitty. Not all. We're not doing black and white absolute thinking, but I truly believe that it is the leadership and the steward of the brand that sets the tone. That's the compass, right? It's brand story is our compass, our GPS, our foundation, our North Star, our lighthouse, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And her believed that culture was a business model. Like, and it again, it showed throughout every part of the organizations. The team members were empowered, they had autonomy to make decisions. And I'm sure anyone that's traveled Southwest has experienced this firsthand. They didn't have to call seven different managers to say, oh, you know what? Here, let me give you this, or let me make this decision. They empowered them to get creative with boarding announcements. And even in the dress code that they had, the guidelines were comfortable and fun and casual, which ultimately created a happy team. And that then transfers onto the experience, right? Happy team, happy clients, happy business. Happy clients, happy team, happy business, happy owner, happy everybody. And so when we talk about culture, I know that sometimes we tend to complicate things, but the bottom line is it comes from brand story. And the leader's job is to be the steward of that brand story and to ensure that brand story is executed throughout every part of the business. And there's a lot to be said, particularly in 2025, about autonomy. And I don't mean free for all. Again, we're not doing absolute black and white thinking, but to empower people to make decisions as long as they have clarity of brands. That is what builds trust. That is what builds a strong culture. That's what gives us all as individuals purpose. It's not a fucking mission statement pasted on the wall in an office or a back room. That's not what it is. It all comes back to that brand story, that core foundation, that DNA, and then aligning the decisions we make with it. And Southwest did an incredible job. The next thing that really differentiated Southwest and allowed them to deliver on their brand promise is, and if you're a client of Passion Squared, of mine, if you're an A school, I have told this story so many times over the years. And again, Southwest is a brand I've studied, I've learned so much from, and Herb Kelleher was absolutely someone that I stayed close with and called a mentor throughout my career. Simplicity, consistency, and trust. So I've said it a million times on this podcast. Consistency builds trust. Consistency builds trust. We've talked a lot about simplicity in menus, simplicity in communication, simplicity in experience. And and Southwest was kind of like the innovator. Now remember, they started in the early 70s. So this was so innovative at the time and so different than any other airline. They were like, you know what? The airline industry is, we're not going to follow that. We're going to follow what we believe our consumer wants and needs. And part of that was pricing, right? You are now free to move about the country. So they made air travel accessible. And one of the ways they were able to keep their prices not the lowest in the world, but at the time, kind of if we look at the price pyramid, at the bottom, the widest part of the pyramid. High volume, meaning high travel, lots of flights, and low cost or low price. So the reason this was all able to be done is they only chose one aircraft. They only chose one aircraft, meaning they could train efficiently, lowered cost of inventory because they're not carrying 7 different aircraft types with 7 different levels, different inventories, 7 different vendors, 7 different training programs. So that simplicity impacted every part of the business to allow them to deliver on those brand promises. If they had multiple different aircraft models, then that would just create more complication and cost more, right? So we can apply this to literally anything. In the salon, we've talked about this on several episodes. If you're a beauty brand, same thing. More SKUs, less efficient, right? It clogs the system. More menu offerings, more confusing, more inventory. And I'm not saying everyone, again, we're not doing black and white absolute thing. I'm not saying everyone should just have, one brand, one inventory, one service. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a big difference between one service and 101 services, right? Right. So they also had no first class, no assigned seats. Everything in the system was designed to support this clarity, this efficiency, and this consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds relationships. Relationships can turn into referrals. You've heard me say it. On and on and on. So that was a huge differentiator. More differentiators, which again spoke directly to who they serve. Now, remember the brand story framework: brand purpose, what problems are you solving? Brand promise, how do you solve those problems? Brand people, who are you solving problems for? And brand products and services, what solutions do you create to help solve the problems of your people? So these are all differentiators. Bags fly free. That was just part of the promise. It wasn't a promotion. It wasn't, we're going to do this, no change fees. They made flying easy, flexible, flexible. You know, you know, they built a culture of trust and differentiation. And when we see so much of the sameness, like look at what this airline's doing, look at that what that salon's doing, look at what this brand is doing. This brand launched scalp care. We're going to launch scalp care, not with any differentiation. We're just going to throw some bottles out there. That's not differentiation. They still are just flying an airline, right? A salon's still just doing hair. A beauty brand is still just creating product. But there's got to be a differentiator, because when we don't have those differentiators, then we become so incredibly vulnerable, because there really is no difference, you know? I guess I'll just go for the cheapest price, or I guess I'll just go, you know what I'm saying? So they had a decades long run of consistency. So hyper focused on their brand promise and delivering that consistently, right? And then things started to go south. Now, yes, leadership changed. Yes, that can have an impact. We've talked about that in several of the episodes. But a brand does not have to implode with a leadership change. But then that goes back to brand story and being the steward, right? Because I know that some folks, I mean, we've all experienced this in businesses. We've seen this, play out in the public square with different brands that we love. Some leaders are just not the right fit, right? They have an ego, they have an agenda, they don't have respect for maybe the heritage of the brand. And when I say that, I want to be clear. I don't mean keeping things the same. Remember, consistency is not boring. Consistency is that thread of your brand story. But yeah, can you do innovative things? Of course you can. We've talked about that in so many episodes. I mean, Taylor Swift, consistency in our personal brand. But yeah, of course, she's new music and new shows and new, styles and new, yes, of course, of course, of course. So when did things start to kind of fall apart? Well, I don't think I know. I mean, leadership definitely um, just got messy. Their tech system aged. So, they kind of like got comfortable. The planes aged, innovation slowed, right? And then they had that big scheduling meltdown over the holidays that really, really hurt them. Complaints go up, loyalty starts to crack, and then the prices started to go up. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I understand price increases. And again, pricing is part of strategy, right? It's part of brand story and market position. However, you cannot be doing price increases and while the brand is eroding, right? When the brand promises are disappearing. That's how you lose a client. That's how you lose a customer. So, yes, we innovate. Yes, we want to tap into what's happening with our customer and what they value and the problems that we're solving for them. But we can't just be like, oh shit, everything's falling apart. I need to raise prices. Because that's not the time. That's not the time. So, okay. I shared a few months ago, I think it was on Facebook and LinkedIn, a little kind of, what was a post? A post about the announcement about no more bags, free bags fly free. And that was absolutely kind of like That was it. Like there was already problems, right? There were already problems. And then they just continue to take away every fucking differentiator that made them who they are. So whether it's the no more free bags or now we're doing assigned seats, it's like, wait, I'm sorry. Who are you? Like, what are you doing? Because you're not Delta. Like, you're not a luxury airline. You're not a luxury brand. At least you never were, right? You're not Spirit because well, Spirit, you know. You don't travel to 80 trillion countries. You are Southwest Airlines. Like, who is making these decisions? This is really wild to me. So, I have to share something with you that's really funny. As I was preparing for this episode, I jumped on Southwest Instagram and this is this is funny, not funny, right? It's one of those things. So, they post this was on July 20th. They post don't text your ex book a flight. Okay. Cute. Don't text your ex book a flight. The first comment, at least my ex comes with free baggage. I mean, this is what's happening. This has been what's happening. And I really want to believe that the leadership of Southwest is listening to these customers, is hyper focused on social listening, and is listening to what I am sure are tens of thousands of employees, team members that have been there for decades that have told them that all of these decisions were not good decisions. Sometimes we make decisions in a vacuum. Sometimes we get some rando, quote unquote, expert on a social media platform saying, you should do this. You don't know my brand. Let me check with my brand because your brand is your compass, right? It's your foundation, it's your North Star, it's how you make decisions. I am I'm shocked like that they have just dumped literally every single differentiator. And that impacts the entire system, primarily attitude, right? You got to think about how those flight attendants feel right now, how those gate agents feel right now. What a bummer. And they were such a huge part of the brand story, of the brand promise in particular, which has so much to do with the experience, the Southwest experience. And your people, if you employ people, they are the front line of that experience, right? And we got to take care of them. We got to listen to them. So, I mean, they just abandoned everything. I mean, Herb Kelleher believed that a brand was a keeping promises, right? Trust is built on promises kept. Southwest was about freedom and accessibility and fun. It wasn't just taglines or slogans or stupid mission statements posted on a wall. And the thing that I think is so important in this episode to remember is that typically brands don't just collapse in a moment, they erode over time. And sometimes as a leader, it's difficult to see that erosion because we're so close. We get so close that we lose sight of what's happening. And that's one of the reasons it's so important to take a step back. It's so important to be in the marketplace with your people, whoever they are. It's so important to, if you're a salon owner or a hairstylist or a lash artist, to visit other businesses, other service businesses, because we do lose sight of that. I mean, this is heartbreaking for me as a brand that I love. And while I'm always going to be an optimist. I'm always going to be an optimist. I believe that it's possible. I mean, we talked about this on the Elf episode a few weeks ago that you can have low price, low cost, and high volume. I believe that Southwest can get back there if they want, but if they don't want to, which every decision they're making says they don't want to, they're done. They're done because how many bajillions of dollars do you have to spend to try to like be the next Delta? Why would you do that? You own such a huge part of the market that you serve. So, I mean, I don't know. I was just listening to Ozzy Osbourne on the way to the office to record this episode. Rest in peace, Prince of Darkness. One of my favorite songs is I Don't Know. And he's like, don't ask me. I don't know. I know you didn't come for my singing. Anyways, that was a huge song in my high school days and big Ozzy fan and super bummed, super sad about that. Anyways, look, Southwest had the love. Their logo was a heart, for God's sakes. They had the loyalty. They had the trust. They really they set the blueprint. Like they again, we have for context, this was 1971. And if you look at like old photos of like air travel, I know like sometimes that like runs around the internet. You see like everyone dressed up in like, fancy clothes and stuff like that. Air travel was not accessible to the average human. So Southwest came in and just said, you are now free to move about the country. And the impact that had on so many people to be able to see their loved ones that were far away and create experiences. They had such clarity. They had such clarity and so much trust. And they chose not to protect it. So many great reminders. And of course, again, I'm an optimist. I really do hope they pull their head out of their ass. I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for so many brands. I think I've been clear on that. Oh, Southwest, you break my heart. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you for sharing your experience on like Apple Podcasts, the ratings and reviews. They mean so much to me because every time you do that, you help the podcast become more discoverable to people it can serve. And I mean, that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it to remind our industry that the fundamentals they don't discriminate. They literally exist in every business category, in every industry. If we look at some of the most iconic brands in the world that are still thriving, they never lose sight of the fundamentals. And they don't have to be boring. The fundamentals can be fun. Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, I love to hear from you. You can always email me at nina@passionsquared.net. You can always DM me on the socials at Passion Squared on Facebook, Nina L. Kovner. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere. And I love your questions. And I also love your suggestions for brands that you want me to feature on the podcast. I won't always, but I do love to hear about the brands that you are interested in. So my DMs are always open and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a peaceful day, night, wherever you are. And I'll see you next week. Bye.